Let's move on to tonight's stories.
Right.
Records of over $10 billion of gold shipped out of Ghana between 2014 and 2016 cannot be traced. A report by civil society platform on oil and gas has revealed over 100,000 kilograms of gold shipped out of Ghana to India has not been accounted for. Ebenezer Sabute has more.
The report, dubbed Lifting the Veil on the Typologies and Nature of Corruption Risks in Ghana's Mining, Oil and Gas sector, seeks to inform the general public about the tendencies of corruption, which is denying the country of the necessary revenue from the extractive sector. It also focused on the risk of corruption in the extractive industry and puts the spotlight on the strengths and weaknesses in the regulation of a sector. The findings of a report which was launched in Accra reveals that between January 2014 and January 2016, a total of 101,179 kilograms of gold was shipped out of Ghana to India without going through the necessary processes. These, together with other mineral exports, are said to have denied the state some significant revenue. Dr. Steve Mantiao is the chairman of a civil society platform on oil and gas.
Switzerland and Dubai, if you put the two together, it's $9 billion of gold. Now, our official record says that we did something around 1.8, 1.9, let's say 2 billion. Strike it out, and you have 7 billion unaccounted for. If you add the Indian one, then we have $10 billion of gold unaccounted for.
And who should be blamed for this?
Well, I think first and foremost, the regulator of the industry. Secondly, the customs, because they have responsibility for ensuring that they properly, gold leaving this country go through proper channels.
The report also criticized the announcement of members of a competitive tendering committee for the allocation of oil block in the West Cape 3 basin.
Look through international best practices, and not one instance have I found that the names of bid evaluation committees are made public. In most of the instances, the bidding process is completed. The award is made before the members of the bid evaluation committee's identity is disclosed. In our case, we did the reverse. I've actually been concerned and engaged Ministry of Energy officials. The official response I've gotten so far is that we are being very, very transparent.
In conclusion, the report also provided a case study to illustrate the forms and nature of corruption risks in the extractive sector. Ebenezer Sabute's report for Joy Business.
Well, the IMF boss, Christine Lagarde, today began a two-day working visit to the country. She participated in the Future of Work conference this morning in Accra. That's one of the major engagements she had as part of her visit. Now, Minister of Planning, John Jan Bafo, addressed the conference earlier. He highlighted government's job creation policy.
Government is also pushing for and supporting an increased focus on science, technology, engineering, and mathematics in schools, particularly in our universities, which will be encouraged to form research and development partnership arrangement with industry. And by 2028, we expect to leverage the abundant human talent to become a leader, at least in Africa, in ICT and software applications development, and to create a technology subsector that generates productive employment with high incomes from our educated youth and opportunities for technological leapfrogging in many areas of the economy. We certainly want to embrace these trends, basically to adopt and adapt new technologies. We are therefore confident that a deliberate focus on technical and vocational training in the context of the free SHS and our focus on agriculture in the context of planting for food and jobs and digitization will yield the needed dividend in the future.
All right, the IMF boss, Christine Lagarde, also addressed that conference. She spoke about the need for greater attention to be paid to job creation.
Has done particularly well. In fact, it is one of only 9 sub-Saharan African countries that met the Millennium Development Goal of halving extreme poverty. At At the same time, most of the new jobs throughout the regions are in agriculture and traditional services, and far too few have been in better paying manufacturing jobs and modern services. So looking at what happened in those years, how can we ensure that the coming decades will generate strong economic growth? We can start by looking at the major forces shaping the region's destiny. The first one is demographics. Sub-Saharan Africa population is expected to increase from approximately 1 billion today to 1.7 billion in only 20 years' time, 2040. The labor force will increase at double the rate of the last decade. And as a result, if you compare with the 9 million jobs that were created on an annual basis over the last 2 decades, it is now 20 million jobs that need to be created in order to keep up with the growing of the labor force. Now, if successful, the region could enjoy a prolonged period of high growth, and that's what everybody calls the demographic dividend.
And as you may be aware, Ghana is set to exit the IMF program after April 2019. The Vice President, Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia, was at that conference to open the summit, and he spoke about how government was going to prudently manage the economy post the IMF program.
The President, Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, has decided that we should not leave fiscal and debt sustainability at the discretion of the politicians. Just as we passed the law to anchor the independence of the central bank, we are also going to pass a law to anchor fiscal and debt sustainability. This is the fiscal responsibility law. And this fiscal responsibility law will cap the fiscal deficit and will also cap the debt to GDP ratio, so that we give assurance to investors as we go forward that Ghana will behave responsibly in a very fiscally very responsibly, no matter which government comes into office. In addition, by the end of this year, we are setting up an independent fiscal council, as well as an independent financial stability council. This has never been done by any government since independence. And this law, as well as the institutions that we will set up, will tie the hands of politicians, including ourselves, to maintain fiscal and monetary discipline going forward.
You're watching Business Live. More news after this break.
Welcome back to Business Live. My name is Sandra Esenamapeno. The WIPA authority seems to be saving the nation from a terrible power situation, as there are indications of challenges in the energy sector. Since September, the peaking plant, which is designed to come on stream during peak hours, is now operating regularly. On December 11, all turbines were turned on to produce power to the tune of 395 megawatts. Odilia Ntiamwa was at the Bui power plant and has come through with the following report.
The Bui power plant has the capacity of producing 404 megawatts every day. Since September, the plant has been producing power using almost all of its 4 turbines. The CEO of Bui says the water storage went as high as 181 meters, which required them to generate more power to avoid spilling.
Some of the generating stations are either down or they are not running at full steam as expected according to the supply plan, or we have an excess water in the reservoir, and if we didn't do that, then we might have to spill. From September, the rise on was quite impressive. And this is the highest so far since we started operations that we've gotten to.
Though they have this capacity, Gridco can decide to hold on to it if all power plants are working, since the Bui power plant is a peaking one. There are indications that some thermal plants are struggling as gas from Nigeria has become a thorny issue. Samuel Kowansa, the director of power at BPA, says the Bui situation has come in timely to save the current events. Calm is expected to be achieved by the close of this year.
If there is a problem in the system, we are called upon. Well, about a month or two ago, I knew we had a problem with the Ghana gas, supply, and I started the compressor had a problem. So we're calling to be running, and we've been running continuously. And the thing is, we don't just run. The system control, that is a department under Gridco, they will call us, look, because they have a broader view of the system. Depending on what is happening in the system, they call us and we run. Maybe there's a shortfall, they expect a generation from another power plant, it's not coming, they will just call us to run. So that is why we've been running almost 3 units continuously for over 2 months.
The Bui power plant generates VAS, which helps to stabilize power or voltage in the 3 northern regions.
So let's stay on this development because it's our big story for tonight, and my colleague Odilia Ntiamwa is here for more. Odilia, welcome to Business Live. You know, from your engagement on the ground, do you sense, do you have a feeling that we are heading towards some power crisis sort of?
I wouldn't say that if gas supply becomes constant and the thermal plants are running, but the indications I get are that if we do not solve some of these problems, then the cheapest form of energy is the one that we're going to be relying on for a long time. And you know that hydro is quite inexpensive as compared to the other mix. And so we're currently doing the hydro from Bui because, one, it's available, because if you take a look at the story, water was actually even hitting their threshold where they were going to spill. And so if you have that renewable energy, then why don't you just use it? And then also it's cheap, like I've said. So definitely they would want to use that. You will know that with car power and some of the other agreements that have been signed, whether we take the power or not, we're going to pay for them.
Right.
And so we better use them. But for thermal, which uses gas and other sources of energy, if we're having crisis there, then we perhaps will have to pause that for the available power that we have. We've been generating quite a lot when it comes to the threshold that the nation needs so that we export some to Burkina Faso and some other neighboring countries. And so for us, what we're doing currently is that we have reached our limits in terms of we've stretched ourselves to the limits. Otherwise, then the excesses also won't be there anymore.
Right.
And so what We Power is currently doing is, if there are issues with thermal plants,
which we currently have anyway.
Yes. You remember that Ghana Gas had issues with its condenser.
Right.
And that's why Bui Power was called on in September. And since then, the schedule from Gridco has not reduced when it comes to the Bui power plant.
So I'm sure you basically touched on how we got there, because we have issues in the system, and then I'm sure that's the reason why we are experiencing the current power outages and all that. But this pressure on the Bui thermal plant, do you think that is sustainable?
Okay,
did I say thermal plants?
Yes, it's not a thermal plant.
It's a hydro plant. The hydro plant.
So what is happening now is that I was told that by December this problem should have ended. They have schedules, for example, to do maintenance. And then they usually will turn some of the turbines off, have their maintenance programs whilst others are running. And so if you take a look at them, they have 3 big turbines and then a turbinette. So 4 turbines.
Running at the same time?
Yes, could be running at the same time.
Right.
But the thing is, because it's a peaking plant and it was not built to be churning out power from A to Z, even though it can, it means that their their maintenance times could be affected because then they will still have to keep generating the power.
Which is very dangerous,
Which is not very good. It may not be dangerous, but I mean, if you got to go and fix your hair and come on air, and then we now see you on air looking all scruffy, I think it won't be very good.
It means that the hairdresser didn't do a good job.
Yes.
But again, so looking at what is currently happening and the way they're operating, how long do you think they can run for we to say that it's okay to stop the pressure on them?
Once Greco calls for the power, they've got to provide.
Right.
But what the director for power told me was that by December, by the close of December, this would have ended, and then they would have come back to their original schedule of just providing power during peak hours. That's from 5 o'clock, up to the next morning.
Do you also think that the energy sector debt has a role to play in all this? Mind you, a lot of institutions, especially the public sector, they are heavily indebted to the ECG. So will you say that it has a role to play?
Yes, it definitely does have a role to play, because if we owe Nigeria, if we have to pay them for gas and we're not providing, then definitely some thermal plants will be affected, and then we would be heading towards this space. Remember also that they owe We Power Authority so much money, but that's public sector against public sector. Now, my joy was that we were going to expect that when Morocco comes on stream, then they were going to take that aspect of their operations. But what I gather from the CEO, which will be playing that aspect of the interview tomorrow, is that actually their dealings with ECG will still be very heavy.
Which is very contradictory to what we know.
Been put out there. So I'm sure tomorrow we'll get into the details of that.
All right, grateful having you on Business Live. That was my colleague Odilia Ntiama giving us all the update from the We Power plants. And let's move to our headline story tonight. Bank has been given the go-ahead to transfer 50 million cedis of its income surplus to its stated capital to meet the December deadline for the minimal capital requirement of 400 million cedis. This was at an emergency general meeting where shareholders unilaterally approved the transfer. There's more in the following report.
It has been an intense year for Bank as managers raced fiercely to raise the needed funds to meet the 400 minimum capital requirement by the Bank of Ghana. The journey to meeting this stated capital started on May 3 when management of Bank at an annual general meeting sought the approval of shareholders to transfer an amount of 250 million cedis from income surplus to its stated capital. This process was completed with the bank's capital remaining at 350 million cedis, still being 50 million cedis shy of the 400 million cedi minimum capital. The bank again had to go back to shareholders for another approval. Here's board chair of the bank, Parok Asuman Van Persie.
To enable us complete our capitalization process and to enable us comply with the Bank of Ghana minimum capitalization requirements.
At the end of the meeting, shareholders voted massively in support of the transfer. Managing Director of Bank is Frank Bracco Edu Jr.
Shareholders to pass that resolution. Once that resolution is passed, you need the central bank to agree that your audited results are acceptable, and then you just register the increase at the Registrar Generals. That's all.
What will be the focus of Bank with its 400 million cedis capital? Are you going to?
Our focus won't change. Don't forget that the whole process of capitalization when it comes to Bank was there was no injection of fresh capital. It was monies that was already in the bank, but differently categorized.
Having all shareholders agree to the transfer of income surplus into the stated capital, what this means is that Bank is now, of course, attaining the minimum capital requirement of 400 million Ghana cedis. I'm Charles Aite for Joy Business.
Thanks so much, Charles Aite, for that report. Last minute preparations.
And after today, it's going to be 7 more days, for working days, I should say, for the banks to meet the minimum capital requirement.
We know ADB is still not ready yet.
The latest we know is that Prudential Bank has met that amount. We know that the Bank of Ghana has approved the merger between First Atlantic Bank and Energy Commercial Bank. We're watching that space for you. Thanks for watching Business Live. My name is Darrell Kwao.
And my name is Sandra Esenamapene. Do log on to myjoyonline.com/business for more business updates. Have a great evening.